Today on Stretch Your Kitchen, there was a time when stretching grocery dollars wasn't merely a trend, it was a harsh necessity. Today, I'm going back in time to learn about how, even in the midst of tremendous hardship, families still gathered around the table and they used exactly what they had on hand to minimize food waste and create satisfying, nourishing meals for their families.
Great meals don't start in the grocery store. They start in your own kitchen. I'm Erica, and I'm on a mission to prove that thoughtful cooking isn't about buying more, but about using better. Welcome to Stretch Your Kitchen.
Throughout periods in history, stretching your kitchen wasn't a trend. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a clever social media tip. It was survival. Can you imagine what it must have been like to have the financial rug pulled out from under you, or to have never even had a financial rug to begin with, all the while knowing you have a family to feed and limited or even no funds to do so? Interestingly enough, during historical periods when money was tight, the kitchen became one of the most important places in the home. People learned how to make something out of almost nothing. They learned how to stretch meals, to reuse leftovers, to save scraps, and to make every ingredient count. And even in the midst of all of that hardship, families still gathered around their tables. They still made dinner. They still found ways to celebrate birthdays and holidays and Sunday suppers. I think there's something so beautiful about that because today, so many of us have so much more access, more convenience, and more abundance than ever before, which is not to say that we aren't faced with struggle. Today, gas prices are soaring and groceries are through the roof. So many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And as I've said before, food insecurity is at an all-time high. But if you reflect on history, you realize the depths of the struggles nearly every family faced in two very difficult eras: the era of the Great Depression, and even before that, slavery in America. I believe we should all want to understand those struggles more deeply. I think that people who lived through those incredibly difficult times have something so important to teach us, not just about saving money and not just about reducing food waste, but about gratitude and resilience and about using what you have and finding ways to feed the people you love, even when life is hard. So today, I want to share with you a history lesson. Today, we're talking about Depression-era cooking and cooking during the era of slavery, and how having an understanding of the past can shape your future and further enhance your desire to stretch your grocery dollars, minimize food waste, and prepare satisfying, delicious meals for you and your family. So that brings me to today's Kitchen Quest.
The Kitchen Quest is where I tackle new topics each week to help you stretch your grocery dollars, minimize food waste, and turn what you already have on hand into delicious, flavorful meals.
The Great Depression was one of the most difficult periods in modern history. It began after the stock market crash of 1929 and quickly spread across the United States and much of the world. Banks failed and businesses closed, and millions of people lost their jobs, often with no savings and no safety net to fall back on. Families who once felt secure suddenly found themselves struggling just to put food on the table. In kitchens across the country, this reality reshaped the way people cooked and ate. Ingredients were scarce and money was tight, and every single item mattered. Meals weren't planned around cravings or convenience. They were built out of necessity and creativity and care. And yet, even in the midst of one of the most difficult economic periods in history, families still gathered and shared what little they had, and they found ways to nourish not just their bodies, but each other. When we think about Depression era cooking, it can be easy to picture bland food or empty cupboards. And yes, many families had next to nothing, so very little kitchen inventory to pull from. But those kitchens were also incredibly resourceful. Meals were always built around staple, simple ingredients like flour and potatoes and beans and rice and onions and bread and oats and maybe some seasonal vegetables if they grew them, eggs if they had chickens, and small amounts of meat when or where they could even find it. People gardened and they canned and they bartered. Neighbors traded maybe eggs for vegetables or milk for flour or soup for bread, and every ingredient had a purpose. Vegetable scraps became broth. Stale bread became breadcrumbs or bread pudding. Bones became soup. Bacon grease was saved in a jar and used to flavor future meals. Nothing was wasted. And that resonates with me because when I talk about waste nothing, freeze everything, and stretch your kitchen, it's really the same idea. The only difference is they just didn't have deep chest freezers and maybe less expansive inventory. But what they had was creativity, and they had determination, and they had the understanding that food was precious. One of the most fascinating Depression era recipes that I've found is something called water pie. Just listen to that for a second. Water pie. It sounds impossible, but it was real. People made a homemade pie crust, a simple pie crust, and then they poured in water. And they added sugar and butter and flour, and sometimes, if they were really lucky, maybe a splash of vanilla. But somehow it baked into something that resembled a custard pie. When I first heard about it, I thought, why would anyone make that? But then I realized that that very question came from my own modern day place of abundance. Because if you have nothing extra in the kitchen, nothing, no fruit, no eggs, no milk, no cream, but you still want your family to have a dessert, you make water pie. Not because it's luxurious or not because it's fancy, but because it says, I love you. I care. I want you to have something sweet, even when times are hard. And that is so powerful because it reminds me that cooking has never just been about ingredients. It's about care. So I ask you, do you cook from a place of care when preparing meals for your family? Do you think not about what you don't have on hand, but rather about what you do have and how you can truly make it delicious? I really hope you do. And I truly hope that Stretch Your Kitchen has been part of that mindset shift. Another Depression era tradition was the soup pot that never ends. Families would keep a pot on the stove and add to it all throughout the week. A potato one day, a carrot the next day, some onion, maybe a leftover ham bone, a handful of beans, maybe a little more water and some salt. And somehow that pot of soup kept feeding people. Dinner was not always a brand new meal every night. Sometimes it was simply yesterday's dinner transformed. Does that sound familiar? I have been working so hard to learn to appreciate what I have on hand, even my leftovers, and transform every ingredient into something flavorful for my family. So many people discard leftovers because maybe they just don't feel exciting anymore. And that leads to massive food waste. What if your leftover bones and roasted vegetables became a delicious, nourishing soup? What if yesterday's rice became a pan of fried rice? What if leftover chicken became tacos or a casserole or a pot pie? Your kitchen does not need brand new ingredients every night. It just needs a little imagination. Just like those who strived to provide meals for their family using whatever ingredients they had on hand, we should do the same. Just because we have the means doesn't mean we should ignore the value of even the smallest of food resources. Our leftovers, our odds and ends. We can make so much from so little with just a little bit of creativity and a desire to minimize food waste. Another Depression era truth was that meat was a luxury, not just steak and seafood, but all meat. Oftentimes, if a family was able to purchase even one chicken, that one chicken would feed that family all week. Sunday might be roast chicken. Monday could be chicken sandwiches. Tuesday might be chicken and rice. And by Wednesday, the bones would be simmering in a pot to make broth for that soup pot that never ends. That chicken was stretched, respected, and used completely. And honestly, I think about that all the time. Because now we often use part of something and just forget about the rest. We buy produce with good intentions, but then it spoils. We throw away bones that could have become broth. And it's not because we are careless, it's because we have lost the habit of seeing every bit of food for its fullest potential. I think about this every single day with my own chickens, my 10 little ladies, my girls. There's something about walking outside and collecting eggs and knowing exactly where they came from that changes the way you think about food. I don't want to waste those eggs. I appreciate them. I use them thoughtfully. I know they matter. And I imagine that families during the Great Depression felt the same way. When you grow your own vegetables, for example, you don't want to waste them. When you raise chickens, you don't waste the eggs. When you work hard for your food, listen to that. When you work hard for your food, which you do, you respect it. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons we can learn. Food is not disposable. It is valuable. And we are so fortunate to have access to it, even when our wallets are feeling the pinch. One of the biggest differences between that era and our modern era is this. Depression-era families did not cook based on what they were in the mood for. They cooked based on what they had. They asked, what needs to be used? What do I have to use? What will feed everyone? What can stretch? What is already here in my pantry? And that is exactly what I have tried to emulate and share through this Stretch Your Kitchen podcast. Because when you cook based on mood alone, you end up making extra grocery trips, or you buy more than you need, or you ignore what is already sitting in the refrigerator. But when you cook based on your own kitchen inventory, you save money and you waste less. And honestly, you become a more creative cook, maybe not by necessity, but by desire, and that is something. Pivoting a little from the Depression era, there's another part of this conversation that matters too, because long before the Great Depression, there were people in this country who had no choice but to make the most of what little they had. So let's jump back in time a little bit and touch on a period of history where food wasn't scarce due to a national economic downturn, but rather due to social constructs. That time is the era of slavery. Plantation owners routinely provided the barest minimum of rations, which were designed for survival because they needed the workforce, rather than health. The staple diet was basically standard weekly rations that were often limited to maybe a peck of cornmeal, which is roughly 1 quart per day, and a few pounds of maybe salt pork or fatty meat or offal. The meat was frequently tainted or even rancid. The diet was typically low in protein and lacked essential nutrients, while masters or slave owners ate prime agricultural products. Enslaved people were given seconds or shorts, coarser, darker flour, or insect-infested corn. To survive, enslaved people often had to try their best to cultivate their own food in their free time, if that was such a thing, which added to their physical burden. They might have had to hunt on their own after their working hours, or maybe work their own small, tiny plots outside of their shacks, or fish at night after laboring all day in the fields. And somehow, from almost nothing, they created meals. Meals that fed families, meals that brought people together, meals that carried culture and memory and comfort. So many foods that we still know and love today came from that resourcefulness. The foods historically associated with soul food, like ham hocks and collard greens, were really like the leftovers and undesirable animal remains that enslaved people were forced to make palatable through survival cooking. And they certainly did make it palatable. Trendy soul food restaurants have popped up all over the world, but the genesis of these delicious meals is struggle and resourcefulness and a desire to still serve up delicious food in spite of scarcity and lack. Collard greens cooked low and slow with ham hocks, cornbread, fried okra, candied sweet potatoes, black-eyed peas, broths made from scraps, and greens, which became a flavorful pot liquor. These meals were not born from abundance. They were born from resilience. And I think it is so important that we recognize that. Because when we talk about stretching food, when I explain the importance of stretching our grocery dollars and minimizing food waste, using scraps and making broth and saving bacon grease and turning humble ingredients into something beautiful, those ideas are not trendy. They came from survival. They came from generations of people who were forced to be incredibly creative in the kitchen because they had no other option. And even in those painful circumstances, people found ways to create flavor. They still found ways to nourish the people they loved. They still found ways to gather around food and make it meaningful. There is something deeply powerful about the fact that some of the most beloved foods in American cooking did not come from luxury. They came from people making the most of what they had on hand. And what I also love about cooking during these historical periods, when food was scarce, people still found ways to celebrate. Birthday cakes were simple. Holiday meals were smaller. Desserts were made from very little, but people still gathered. And there was music and conversation, and there was still gratitude. The table was not about abundance. It was about togetherness. And isn't that what truly matters? Because we live in a time when people feel pressure to make everything perfect. Perfect meals, perfect holidays, perfect entertaining. But sometimes the most meaningful meals are the simplest ones. A warm pot of soup, fresh bread, a salad, a casserole, a dessert made from pantry staples. I want you to hear me when I say, when you stop believing that you need more ingredients, more groceries, more recipes, and more stuff to make a good meal, you realize you already have more than enough. And when you put it in the context of our struggling predecessors, you realize how much more than enough you truly have. Now, that is not to say that we're not struggling too. We are living in some financially scary times. As I said, gas prices are through the roof. Groceries are more expensive than ever. Many families are living paycheck to paycheck. Food insecurity is rampant. Let's be real. Most of us are feeling the struggle. But in the midst of our current struggle, we still live in a nation that doesn't take food waste seriously enough. We haven't even touched the levels of struggle of the Depression-era families or the enslaved. Have you ever stood in front of the refrigerator and said, "Ugh, there's nothing to eat"? Have you ever bought groceries that maybe you forgot to use? They got lost somewhere in the back of your refrigerator or pantry? Have you ever thrown away leftovers? Listen, I am not here to make anyone feel bad. I'm just here to paint a picture of what it means to really stretch grocery dollars, to minimize or even virtually eliminate food waste. It is my calling. And as this first season of Stretch Your Kitchen comes to an end, I really hope I've made an impact on the way you view the items you have on hand, your kitchen inventory. I hope you see the possibility in each and every item you have purchased. I hope you feel gratitude for the gift of food. And most importantly, I hope you are experiencing the joys of using every item you have on hand to create delicious food for you and your family. And so this week, I'm forgoing the culinary concern segment. I truly hope that rather than wondering how, you confidently just will. Because each and every one of us has the power to stretch our grocery dollars, minimize food waste, and prepare delicious, satisfying meals. Great meals don't start in the grocery store. They start in your own kitchen. And it is my sincere hope that through this podcast, you've begun to embrace that truth for yourself as you continue your own journey to stretch your kitchen. So let's move on to today's Triple T takeaway.
Each week, I'll leave you with my Triple T takeaway. That's tips, tools, or tasks to begin implementing the Stretch Your Kitchen lifestyle. These simple takeaways prove that thoughtful cooking isn't about buying more, but about using better.
This week's Triple T takeaway is a practical application. It's a summation of everything we've discussed this season. Over the course of the next 4 weeks, as Stretch Your Kitchen takes a season break, I would love for each of you to prioritize several simple guidelines. Number 1, shop your kitchen first. Before you go to the grocery store, look at what you already have on hand. Those random ingredients can become something delicious. Maybe embark on another Kitchen Cleanout Chronicles, as I've talked about before, and see how many meals you can make from items you already have on hand. Number 2, stretch your proteins. Use beans, eggs, rice, potatoes, or grains to make your meat go further. Remember, these items not only stretch your meat, but add additional protein and nutrients to your diet. Number 3, save your scraps. Vegetable peels, onion ends, carrot tops, herb stems, and bones. They can all become broth. Maybe make your own version of the soup pot that never ends. Number 4, reinvent leftovers. Yesterday's dinner can become tomorrow's lunch or next week's soup with a little bit of creativity. Number 5, respect what you buy. If you spend money on it, use it. Waste nothing, freeze everything. And number 6, keep it simple. You do not need elaborate meals to feed your family well. Remember, even if it isn't perfect, it will be delicious and it will have been made with care. Sometimes the simplest food is the most comforting. So maybe tonight you're not making your own water pie, but perhaps you will pause before throwing something away. Maybe you save the bones from dinner. Maybe you freeze your leftover vegetables. Maybe you turn your stale bread into croutons, or maybe you just ask yourself, what can I make from what I already have on hand? Because stretching your kitchen is not a new idea. It is a forgotten one. The generations before us did not have more. They simply used what they had better. And that is the heart of Stretch Your Kitchen. And it has truly been my privilege to share it with you. That's all for this season of Stretch Your Kitchen. Over the weeks ahead, I'll be sharing short videos to the Stretch Your Kitchen Facebook group and the Stretch Your Kitchen YouTube channel. Season 2 of Stretch Your Kitchen will return in June with new episodes that are sure to get you thinking about what you prepare and how you prepare it in order to stretch your grocery dollars, minimize food waste, and serve up delicious meals for you and your family. And I can't wait to share an exciting new component of Stretch Your Kitchen. It's a spin-off of sorts, and it puts a whole new twist on how I prepare delicious, flavorful meals from the comfort of my own kitchen. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support.
Thank you for listening to Stretch Your Kitchen. If you enjoyed this episode or feel that it would be useful to someone else, please leave a review on Podchaser and follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Stretch Your Kitchen. And remember, thoughtful cooking isn't about buying more, but about using better.
To